Of October 20, 2010. Welcome to those present. Thank you for being here, and welcome everybody who's watching on Amherst Media. We appreciate your interest in Amherst Government and Finance Committee. Our agenda starts with an item of news affecting budget, and one significant thing that I want to have covered in there is that there is a first quarter report that's available on the town expenditures, but I think that we'll save that for a little bit later in the agenda, and at least start with item number 2, discussion of November special town meeting warrant articles, because there's a couple of members of LSSE staff who are here, and I want to let them tell us a little bit about Article 3 and the plans for the War Memorial Pool and the proposal, and start that discussion and see what questions we have from them. And then we will hold the, voting on that until Dave Zomack comes, because he was involved in the drafting and submission of the grant, and if he has anything else he wants to add. David is also going to talk about several other warrant articles, including the Puffer's Pond article, when he gets here. So if you guys want to come on up so that you're not way out there in the distance.
I also have paper copies of the grant application, which I emailed them to you yesterday, but if you want a paper copy, here they are. That's it.
Thank you. I appreciate both of you being here, Barbara. We need to have a better understanding. It is somewhat unusual, but really is consistent with the vote the town meeting made last year about reopening the pool, for us to take up such a large capital item at a fall town meeting. But when Ms. Moran comes, she will tell us about where the Joint Capital Planning Committee came in. But I think it would be very helpful to just hear your presentation about the plans for the pool and the perspective you have on the grant application, and the exciting forecast you have of what we might see ahead if it gets funded.
Thank you very much. I'm Linda Chalfant, the Director of Amherst Leisure Services, Supplemental Education, and this is Barbara Bills, who's the Assistant Director, as well as the Director for the Aquatics Program, so she has much data as well. And I guess I would start by saying that we're very optimistic about the grant application that went forward, and just add a few words about that. Perhaps Dave Zomack will want to say more, since he was actually the chief architect of that with his staff. If the application is approved, and we've heard good things, at least initially, from the state about their interest in that grant, we will receive a major sum of money to do the renovations that are really important, necessary in order to open the pool this coming summer. What would be addressed would be the pool structure itself, the swimming pool structure itself, in terms of repairing the perimeter around the pool, the drain line that recirculates the water from the filter system. We would also upgrade the filter system that is quite old, that's in the filter room just below the pool. We would make changes to the decking. The decking would be resurfaced completely. It's got a lot of upheavals right now, the cement decking. And with that would also come the fencing. The fencing would be replaced. That would come along with the changes to the decking. It's been there for many years as well too. So it's actually the pool proper. The pool itself is in need of a liner which would be very useful in terms of the ongoing year-to-year maintenance that takes place. We have a pool structure right now, which is carbon steel. It's withstood many years from its 1954 origination, but it requires really regular painting, regular sandblasting to remove rust, which is yearly, and a pool liner would be something that would be put in place and will take care of a lot of that day-to-day maintenance. And has a warranty. The ones that we have seen have warranties in excess of 20 years. So we're very interested in that itself. Other areas connected with the grant that have been earmarked for help would be lifeguard chairs, and pool ladders, these pieces associated with the pool itself, and then some work that would take place in the pool house. We're looking at some an addition to the pool house in terms of some ventilation. Really, that doesn't exist now, and has created some problems in the restroom and shower room areas where we're dealing with a lot of peeling paint and floors that don't hold paint very well because of closed-in areas. So this would be a great modification to introduce. I know the floor itself as well in the pool house is something that we hope we can address with the grant, and that's probably, yes, I think that might be about.
I think there's some roof repairs included and some electrical upgrades, is there?
Mm-hmm.
There's a line item budget on the second to last page of the packet.
This morning, Mr. Musanti said that, and yes, he was at a meeting this morning at Town Hall.
That's what I'm here.
And so it's great having him there. He says that one of the, he had a couple of comments about it. One is he saw it as a larger part of the whole community field project, that he's very interested in upgrading community field, but he also made a comment that in relation, I think, to the liner in particular, that it would save significant money on an annual basis for the Department of Public Works in opening the pool. But he didn't report as to whether that savings amount had been quantified or whether there were other operational savings that are ongoing that might be quantified.
Speak to that.
Sure.
As far as the savings operational for installing that liner, yearly we probably spend close to $1,500 just on paint alone, just on the supplies. It has to be grinded, and if they grind it, then they add an epoxy paint to it. It has to be sealed again, and then repainted the pool totally repainted. And the labor in that, I don't know exactly what that would be, but it's quite a bit. It takes at least this whole process a week to 2 weeks to do. So it's an expensive process, so that would be a savings, certainly, and I'm sure we could provide you on the labor cost later on if you need that. That's done by the Parks Department.
I'm just curious. Are liners these days, are they actual plastic installed liners? Are they spray-on liners? It must be some technology that's advanced beyond the old thick plastic liner.
Yes.
It's not really a finance committee question, it's really curiosity.
There's several different models out there. The one that we received a grant in is it's positive. Let's see if I have it.
There are 2 or 3 companies that are in this business.
But it's something that comes with a long-term warranty.
Right, yeah, at least 25,
Yep.
20, I believe, at least 20 years, I'll say that, more than that.
Just see if it has.
I'm agreeing, Laura, that I think it's a poly product.
Oh, yes.
It's an artificial product.
Yeah, I don't need the specs, I was just curious.
Duratech, which now has its own
Branded name.
Trademark name.
Thank you.
Which, to add to what Barbara said about the savings coming from, to the Parks Department in terms of the labor cost, another area where there'd be savings, I think, is that we're tussling with the spring weather as to when the painting can happen, and since that's the first approach to getting the pool ready and doing the grinding, as we've mentioned, it's sometimes a very close call. We certainly can't fill the pool and can't start to balance the water chemically until all of that happens. So it is a long stretch. We're thinking about all of this in March and April and ordering supplies, so it would start to shorten some of that. And that would be at least staff savings as well here with our department as well as with DPW.
Just following up on that, given that the prep would be theoretically a little shorter in the springtime, not as weather dependent, would it mean that you could potentially open the pool, say, for weekends before school's out, if the weather was nice? I mean, if it was warm enough in mid-June.
Potentially, if the operation.
If you had, if you have obviously people hired and they're available. A lot of college students are done by the end of May. So, the first weekend, as opposed to the 25th of June, if you get a couple weekends in before, that's another, a little bit of revenue potentially there to help out. And it'd be nice if we could.
Yeah.
I think
Which applies to both pools.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I can't deny that I'm a regular pool user, and therefore I have knowledge of some of these issues. No, another thing, because I'm a regular pool user and talk to staff from time to time, one of the things that has been reported to me is about the substantial leakage of water out of the War Memorial Pool in the last several years of its operation. What was described to me was your staff having to spend considerable time in the evenings making sure that the pool is adequately filled in the amount of water being used, and it struck me that it must cost additional chemicals. So since that has been remarked to me by one of your who was probably not licensed to report to me that this is a significant issue, I was curious as to whether the repairs that you're envisioning will take care of that, and if so, if you've quantified that savings question.
these repairs will definitely take care of that. That will be one of the very first things that will be addressed, which is that line, that drainage line that is around the perimeter of the pool. That's the first. In fact, I know that Department of Public Works has made some initial investigation. They've opened up. They've taken out some concrete to start to inspect what does that whole area look like. And let me, and just thinking about the quantifying the savings piece for you, think about that for a moment. But I'm also going to pass around a summary of the repair timeline, and on the back of it there's a detailed listing of when the work would take place and what the work is.
I'll speak, sure, to your point also, our water bill, the last year that we were at, had War Memorial Open, was upwards of $10,000 beyond that. So our normal water bill was around $4,000.
Yeah.
So approximately,
Okay. Oh.
at least 6,000. It could have been more. I can look up the old water bills, but it was substantial. It's part of it.
And certainly we would see some change with the chemical bill, I would think as well too, because adding fresh water would mean that the chemical balance would be off, and so we have to adjust that. There'd be staff time involved as well as materials.
I think one of the aspects too is that there's going to be a new digital chlorine monitoring system, so that, which I don't pretend to know what it is, except that it will allow kind of continuous automatic monitoring of the chlorine levels, as opposed to people having to, dump the test tubes in and run around and change the chlorine levels. So I think it will make it a better pool that way. I don't know if they'll use less chlorine, but they'll be able to keep it at more of a steady state. So I think it would be more efficient anyway.
So if I digest the document correctly, this is a 2-for-1 grant proposal. We put in 86. The state comes back with more than 200. Is that what it works?
Yeah, they on the budget, I think it breaks it down. There's 89 is the total cost to the town if we get the whole grant. That's a 30% cost, and the state's eventual coverage would be 208, 320, which is 70% of the cost. That is assuming that we get the full amount of the grant. We applied for $297,600, it is possible that they give us less than that they don't fund some things. I don't think we'll get more than that, but whatever we get, it will be a 70-30 split. And then if we don't get the full grant, we would have to make some decisions as to whether we want to use town money to make up the difference, or whether we have gone through some exercises. I've got some numbers that are draft as options if the committee wants to discuss that. But I think the important thing to say is that we are committed. Our recommendation is to be committed to do this project, whether we get the grant or not. And if we don't get the grant, we may cut back on the scope somewhat. But I think town meeting spoke out loudly and clearly last spring and wants to see this happen, and so we're committed to moving forward on it.
I guess that was the only question I was driving at. That if you don't get the whole grant, you are considering making up funds to do the job completely, as opposed to doing kind of pool on the cheap, which you wouldn't want to get into, because then 10 years from now you'll end up in the same circumstance where you are now.
Well, just to give you some sense of what we might do differently, in fact, why don't I pass this around? And again, this is purely for discussion purposes. This was in the summer when we were thinking about option A and option B. We banged around some of these ideas, and if we didn't get the full amount of the grant, or if we didn't get the grant, I think we'd want to go back and take another look at the elements here. But it includes things, just going down the list, that the first thing I mentioned was this digital chlorine monitor. We might not do that. That's, I think, an improvement, but it's not, the pool could still run the way it does now if we didn't get that. On the decking, instead of a total replacement of decking, we could maybe just grind down some of the decking to fix some of the heating, the way sometimes you see on a sidewalk if a panel of concrete sidewalk just lifted up, and then again, it would, I think that would be our second choice, to do it that way. On the fencing, keeping the existing poles and replace the fencing and paint it. Instead of installing security lighting, we would put motion sensor lights on the pool house, so that if people were climbing the fence at night, not being where they're supposed to be, that thing would light up. We would buy 6 lifeguard.
That should be benches.
Benches, yes.
Oh, excuse me, 6 benches. That's right, instead of 10. And instead of putting, we were going to buy lane markers, which that they float in the water there, which both make it more pleasant for people to swim laps, but also helps with our ADA compliance, and that we might have to eliminate. And then on the, within the pool house itself, there's some things like resurfacing the floors we might have to put off. We do think the ventilation system is a key element, we would keep that. But some of the work on the gutters and the drainage on the pool house and some of the upgrades to the furnace room might be put off. We do think that we could apply for a second grant, a second part grant for the pool house portion of the area down the road, and there are issues. One of these days we're going to have to deal with the roof. It doesn't need to be done right away, but eventually we will have to deal with it. And that there may be other ways to enhance the operations of the pool by making the pool house more functional or user-friendly. But we consciously drew a line at the pool and the pool house and put all those things off till later. But anyway, these are some things we've discussed that might be modified or dropped if the finance is required.
Okay. Questions on this aspect of it right now? Another element that I thought we should at least touch on is the first half of the words of the article itself. Don't have to do with money, but have to do with transferring the care, custody, and control of the land to the LSSE Commission from the town manager. And I think it's important to understand why that's necessary and what are the possible consequences of that.
It is a grant requirement from this particular program requires, since they're giving basically recreation money, they want to make sure that land is basically used for recreation purposes going forward. And you know, in a lot of cities and towns, there is a formal recreation commission and so forth that has legal authority over parkland or recreation land. That doesn't happen to be the case here in Amherst, but we do have the LSSE Commission. And in our discussions with the state and with town council, they drafted the language this way, and they think that this will give enough recreation oversight to the pool area. It's a small portion of the whole community field area. That's about 8 acres. And so we limited it to the immediate pool area. Obviously to give us flexibility in the future if there are other things that happen with community field, which is under the jurisdiction by the town act of the manager. Is there anything you want to add about that?
No. It's just that I believe that the park grant, receiving the park grant, and then with this change would mean that this area would be considered recreation parkland into perpetuity. It's that is the intent of the state. That would be a piece that would come with this.
Are there any foreseen negatives to doing this that you've heard about and think are baloney or that you think might be real?
I actually think it would be a very good thing. That we have 57 acres of recreation parkland and then another 60-some acres of land with our Cherry Hill Golf Course. But that compared to many communities, that's a very light number. And to be able to keep and hold on to that land would be an important thing to do.
Who is care, custody, and control of the other recreation lands like Mill River, Plum Brook? Are they under Groff Park? They're all under the town manager?
There.
So is there any land other than, right now before this comes before town meeting, is there any land that's under the care, custody, and control of the commission?
There is not. I believe that the commission's charge really speaks to overseeing, an overview, and an interest, and guidance, and advisory. And the commission does take a very strong interest in capital projects that take place and new initiatives in terms of parkland. But officially, they are not a They're an appointed committee, not a voted committee, which I think is what Sandy was speaking to, that in some communities there are park commissions that are voted, just as we have the library trustees are voted, so it's different in that way.
Are there any liability issues that if there's an accident that occurs on in pool property right now, the town is the defendant?
I think the town still would be.
The town will still
But it's
commission protected.
Well, the commission in itself doesn't have any assets. The members would serve with the same immunity, that qualified immunity, that anybody who's serving in the public and
Okay.
indemnified the same way. That's my informal legal opinion.
Yeah, that's, just so everybody knows, the select board did have a conversation about this at its meeting on Tuesday, and the alternative that was sort of recognized more than pursued to any great extent was towns that have recreation departments that are under the supervision of the town manager. In that circumstance, you wouldn't run into this problem, that we sort of have a unique thing because we do not have a recreation department under the auspices of the town manager.
Could you
yes.
clarify that for me, please? A recreation department, isn't that similar to LSSE, which is a department?
Well,
I'm not clear what that means. And is a recreation department, in terms of what the selectmen are talking about, an elected department?
no. I think there are probably three different models, and Linda might be able to help us with this a little bit too. Probably three different models that we're talking about. One is a model where there's a recreation department that's a department like the police department, the fire department, where there's no independent board or commission. And then there's the question, there's the possibility of, well, there's an elected commission, we sort of have this appointed commission, but they're just different models.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that the conversation goes farther than the recognition of the fact that there are different models, and that the problem is that we have the pools managed directly by a commission, which is your employer, Lee.
Well, I would say that my employer is really the town of Amherst, and my supervisor is the town manager.
Yeah.
And the commission in our model is considered to be advisory, strong advisory, and they meet regularly and routinely, and what they have to say is certainly given strong review. But it is, we are viewed as the town of Amherst department, and the name, and actually some of you may know that we were at one time, prior to 1982, I think, we were the town of Amherst Recreation Department. But there was, interesting, there were some changes to our purview. We accepted, we joined in with the Amherst School Department, the Amherst School Department's continuing education program at the time, and there was a name change. So, but we certainly do see ourselves as a recreation department. What I would add in terms of the model that exists in many communities, not perhaps so much in New England, but around the country, is a Parks and Recreation Department, or a Recreation and Parks Department that are joined together. So that's something that is fairly, I won't say that's unique in this area, but it certainly does exist.
More prevalent in the rest of the
More
United States.
prevalent, very prevalent in the rest of the United States. And whereas here, we have the program functioning taking place in a recreation program, or LSSE, if you will, and then we have the maintenance piece is taking place within the Department of Public Works. That's the part that's different.
Further questions on this?
Can I move that we recommend this article?
Well, I think that the only question, first of all, I wanted to hear from if JCPC has taken any action on this from the chair of that committee. And then the question was whether we wanted to if there are any questions from Mr. Zomack when he gets here, since he wrote the grant. But I think that at this point, I'm not bothered by this transfer. I think it's entirely appropriate. We have been advised by Commonwealth that we have to do it to qualify for the grant. Therefore, it seems to be a part and parcel of it. We're going to have to explain this to town meeting. I thought it was important that we understand it, and it's kind of a piece that's missed when people look at it. But I'll just go on record as saying that I was just trying to exercise due diligence by getting it out in the air more than anything else.
And just to follow on that point a little bit, in our conversations in JCPC, this came up and we talked about it at length a little bit as well. But I think the key point to be made is that while we have effectively had the whole of Community Field, pretty much except for the part where DPW has their building and store their mowers and whatnot, be recreation, it's not explicitly been deemed as recreation property. And that's really the effect of that piece. And we're actually not taking the whole thing. So as not being explicitly deemed that way, we could use it for other purposes. So we could stick a building on it that's not recreation at all because we own it and we can do what we want with it. But once we put this kind of restriction on it, then we're being explicit that we're going to use it for what we've always used it for, which is recreation. So we're just being more explicit in our definition of that. And they actually, if I'm not mistaken, they've limited it to just the pool area at present. And then I think that as the conversations continue around Community Field as a whole and how that knits in with the cemetery and Kindred Park and everything else that's in that part of town, I mean that we still have the flexibility if we want to maybe not have all of Community Field be designated as recreation, but certainly this part for the pool with this level of investment, there's no reason not to lock it in formally.
I guess my take, I mean, that I understand that, but it also seems that it's a relatively small price to pay, granted lack of flexibility and perpetuity, but for a very big leverage advantage that you get to get a Cadillac pool system that's not going to deteriorate over a short depreciation schedule.
Okay, did JCPC have a recommendation on this?
Yes, we did. We recommended it 6-0. There were 2 people absent. I would like to, I don't know if you talked about this before I got here, but a couple of us, me, for one, have always felt that it's ideal to have all capital projects come forth at once when we go through the capital planning process in the winter and the spring, so we know what's competing with what else. And the reason that this is going forward now is that the park grant, as Dave Zomack explained it to us, is a once-a-year program. And so you apply now or you wait till next year. And so it's an off-cycle grant program. It's off-cycle with our capital planning process. So that's why it's coming up now at the fall town meeting.
Anything else? So at this point, it's up to the committee. If somebody wishes now to make a motion, I will allow a motion because I really can't not. But it's a question that I think just poses to whether you want to wait for Dave Zomack to come and see if he has anything else he wants to add. If you feel you know enough now and you want to make the motion, then I will certainly accept the motion.
I'm a little gun shy, but I'm going to go ahead anyway.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion, and the motion is to support this article. Okay, so this point, then, we have a motion made by Bob Saul, which was seconded, I believe, by Mary Lou. The Finance Committee support and recommend Article 3 to town meeting. And we've had substantial discussions here, but I will entertain, is there any other discussion of the motion?
I just want to clarify that if we don't get the grant, will we still just go forward with the project?
Yes. We may trim it back a little, but our recommendation to town meeting would be to go forward with substantially all of the project, and we just wouldn't get any reimbursement. We'd have to spend all of the money ourselves.
If we did that, or let me flip it around. If we didn't do that and cut it back, is there a possibility of coming back for a park grant then next year to get the remaining amount? Are we giving up money by going ahead and funding it all ourselves?
That's a good question. I don't know for sure. I assume that once they've either decided not to fund an element or to fund the whole thing, that it would be unlikely that they would fund it in a subsequent year. So we would really have to make the choice about would it make sense from a work point of view to get things done all at once. I think, as I said before, we would come back sometime later to them and try to get a grant for the pool building and so forth. And we will have to figure out whether we could put some of those elements in that second phase. But
well, it's more a question of if we don't have anything funded, if they just turn down the grant totally this year, would there be the opportunity to reapply and a chance of obtaining it the following year? Do they do that?
Yes, I think you can reapply. I don't know whether we would make it out of town meeting. But that's not the question you asked.
Yeah, I know it wasn't a question I asked it, but it is a question of whether it's information we wanted to provide the town meeting. And,
right.
So that's why I asked
Quote.
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, then all in favor indicate by raising hands. So it's 6-0. And no abstentions. One member is absent this evening.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very helpful.
Clear up next.
Yeah, just quickly, is there a volunteer on writing this one up?
I don't totally understand it, I can try.
Oh, hey.
Sorry, come on up.
Come on up.
No, you already did a bunch.
What are we gonna?
This is about all towns.
I think it's the
You
new
bet.
Article 8.
Eight. Yeah, it's 20 Okay, guys, I'm going to call the meeting back to order, and we want to turn to Article 8, which is entitled Local Option Abandoned Property. And this is about accepting provisions of a statute. Claire, hi, welcome.
Hi, thank
Can
you.
Tell us about it.
So the abandoned property in discussion, in this case, are checks that are never cashed. We issue checks, as you can imagine, to lots of vendors and employees, a few of which get lost and never get cashed. So there's a process to return those funds. The process involves several financial steps, but gradually to return those funds to the general operating stream of things. What municipal relief of 2010 did was give us a little more flexibility in how that process is managed and relieve some of the administrative burden. We are obligated to provide notice to all those people to whom those checks were issued, which gives them the opportunity to call us up and say, yes, I really do want my money, even though that check is 2 years stale. And we still have a strong obligation to provide all that notice. It does shorten the waiting period from 3 years to 1, and it eliminates the responsibility to list in the newspaper uncashed checks of value that less than $100.
Questions?
Would you repeat it? Less than a year now?
So right now it's 3. If we accept Article 8, the provision within for local acceptance, it is shortened to 1 year.
That means 1 year to take it back into our treasury. If they show up afterwards, they can still get their money. Is that right?
No, it means if the check is issued today on October 20th, it is a valid check and it can be reclaimed at any point it can just go to the bank and be cashed for 1 year. At the close of a year, we can start the process, which requires notice and posting on the website and direct mail to every recipient. Then there's a 90-day window, then there's another 60-day window. But it means we can start the process after 1 year. So the check only has to be stale 1 year instead of 3 before we start the process.
Okay.
Just what was the cutoff limit for advertising in the newspaper, the new one?
If we accept, it's $100.
So anything under 100?
Anything under 100. We still have to send them mail and we still have to list them on the website, but we do not have to put it in a legal ad in the newspaper.
I guess other than, you know, the efficiency of the process, 3 years seems pretty lenient. That's what Kay's point is really the main financial impact on the town, right? Is that you don't have to do these advertisements for very small amounts of money.
Right, because legal ads are expensive. The rest of the relief is administrative. That this list management task is shorter and includes a 1 year continuously rolling list of uncashed checks instead of a 3 year continuously rolling list.
Okay, other questions, Doug?
Slightly curious, what kind of amount of money are we talking about in general, sort of sitting in that uncashed check? Sort of checks written but not cashed section of the budget, or I should say the ledger. I mean, how big a number are we talking about?
It's not huge. It's $10,000 a year or so. We just did the process by the old rules, and we returned $36,000 to the general fund. But it was 3 or 4 years worth of accumulated tailings.
Right.
Other questions? Does anyone wish to make a motion? Okay.
Move we recommend Article 8, approval of Article 8.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made by Kay, seconded by Doug, that we recommend to town meeting Article 8. Any discussion? No discussion, then we'll proceed to vote. All in favor indicate by raising hands. So it's 6-0. Thank you very much. It's very helpful. Okay. This is about the same things we're talking about. Okay. Good, thank you. Yeah, I think that Ms. Graney has graciously come to meet with us regarding the proposal from the Committee on Homelessness, and that's I believe, the last article in the warrant. So it is Article 18, and it is the only petition article that I'm aware of on this particular warrant, and I think that Ms. Graney has prepared to speak on behalf of the committee that is submitting it. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Wei-Lin Greeny. I was the chair of the former Committee on Homelessness. First of all, I want to thank you for having me here tonight to make a presentation to you about Article 18. Article 18 is an advisory article. It asks town meeting to advise the select board to establish a committee, and the committee is proposed to be called Committee on Homelessness. The charge of the committee includes: 1, participate in local and regional discussions to prevent and end homelessness. 2, provide recommendations to the select board and town manager on the best known practices to prevent and homelessness and end homelessness. 3, assist the town and town manager in implementing those practices. 4, assist the town in securing a permanent site for the town's homeless shelter. 5th, assist the town to secure permanent supportive housing for the chronically homeless. 6th, assist the town to secure safe and decent housing to meet the needs of the very low income and the extremely low income households in Amherst. Article 18 points out that the former Committee on Homelessness was able to focus its attention to address the sheltering and housing needs of the homeless and the extremely low-income households in Amherst in a very focused way that after 20 years of speaking about establishing a homeless shelter to meet the needs of the homeless, the town, with the assistance of the former Committee on Homelessness, was able to establish a shelter 2 years ago. And a 3rd shelter season will begin on time this year on November 1st, 2011. And the concerted effort to also bear fruit in other ways, such as hundreds of thousands of community development block grant dollars were successfully advocated by the former committee to fund projects that benefit the homeless. To name a few: the funding for the feasibility study of 2008, the funding for building single occupancy units of 2009, the emergency assistance funds for rent and fuel of 2011, and finally shelter funding for 2010 and 2011. Representatives from towns and cities in the Pioneer Valley set a goal in 2008 to end homelessness by 2018. Article 18 advises the town to build 16 to 20 units of supportive housing for Amherst residents who have been identified to be chronically homeless, meaning that they have been homeless more than 4 times in 3 years, or they have been homeless for 1 continual year. Article 18 also advises the town to start building housing for households in the 30% area median income bracket whose housing needs are oftentimes neglected and who can only afford rent at the $350 range. And in Amherst, the 1-bedroom apartment rent is on average about $750. And right now we do not have any housing in this $350 range. So to achieve all those goals, Article 18 advises the Select Board to establish a committee with this very specific and focused set of charges mentioned above. Thank you.
See if others have questions first. You gave a list of charges. They're not in the article itself, the charge that you just read.
It's on the end of whereas, if you look at from the bottom 3 up.
There are 3 bullets there. Okay, I mean, I just...
Because of limitation of how many words we could put in there. So we made it very condensed matter. And for tonight's presentation purpose,
okay,
I kind of break it up to make it more digestible.
Of course, just as a matter of form, you could have a motion that's different and more detailed than the warrant article if the town moderator determines that it's consistent with the scope of the motion, or scope of the warrant article rather. Bob?
What happened to the other committee on homeless? You're referencing a committee that preceded the one that you're proposing. Did it dissolve?
The committee of homeless, the former committee of homelessness was dissolved in September. And also the Housing Partnership and Fair Housing Committee was also dissolved at the same time. And currently the Select Board is proposing to have a sheltering and housing committee which address a range of issues, including affordable housing for the low income, which is people who can afford about $1,300 a month of rent, and to address workforce housing, which is similar in the price range, and also to address housing for the very low income, which is about maybe $800 rental range, to the extremely low income, which is the number I mentioned, about $350,000.
So the old committee had a limited charter then?
The old committee was just focusing on the people who are currently homeless, who are either also chronically homeless, meaning have been homeless for a number of years, and the extremely low income population. So that's the focus the old committee had, plus the shelter, establishing a shelter in Amherst.
Okay.
My understanding is that the Select Board's intention is for the new committee to encompass that charge, as well as to look at the whole spectrum of affordable housing, including sheltering for the homeless. Isn't that right?
That's the Select Board's idea of doing the housing piece, and the committee felt it's too broad a charge to bear any fruits. So the committee felt the reason why the Committee on Homelessness was able to make headways in the various things I described to you, establishing a shelter, advocating for hundreds and thousands of dollars of grant money, and was able to commission a feasibility study a couple of times to identify which parcel, which building is the best for the supported permanent housing for the chronically homeless, all because the committee has very limited focused population and therefore able to meet the needs.
Okay, I think I've got it. Then Article 18 seeks to narrow the charge, create a new committee that has a narrower charge than the committee that the Select Board is suggesting. Do I have that correct?
That sounds right.
Yeah, I think we can ask Mr. Zelmak that question in a couple of minutes, but I think that there have been two committees. One was on affordable housing and one was focusing on homelessness, and that there was at various times questions about whether the two committees were running at cross purposes with each other, and the part of the thought behind creating one committee was to more broadly focus, but then bring it all under one committee. And if that's right or not, maybe Dave will be able to help us. But the other thing that I wanted to make sure that we touch on, last year when we did our budget hearings and we were meeting with departments that David manages on a regular basis, conservation, planning, development, one of the major questions that this committee had was, how can you possibly manage the number of committees and boards that you are currently managing, and what is the cost in staff time and the need for more staff and other costs in order to support all of these boards and committees. And there was a rather long list of committees that was presented to us. We talked about that some, and we thought that we wanted to come back and revisit the issue at a future date, because we recognize that there's a delicate balance between the value that is a community value of having citizen participation with the number of boards and committees that exist and the cost to support them, and to the extent that the Finance Committee should be looking at the financial impact of things that are done, that was an element of it. So it would seem that, and this is not having discussed this beyond that meeting that we had probably in February or March last year, that taking two committees to one was in the direction that we had discussed last year, and if this is moving us back to two committees, that it doesn't achieve that goal of efficiency. And so, Wei-Ling?
If I could respond to this, the issue at table, it's about needs of the specific population of people being met. If the Finance Committee is interested in reshuffling all committees and make it more condensed to provide staff with more time to work on the committees, that's a separate question. So if your committee is interested in doing efficiency, reducing the number of committees to allow committees be taken care of by various staff members, then that's your decision. However, if you focus that efficiency end on this issue, whether two committees should be combined, such, then I would feel it's not, it's a very piecemeal type of thing. And in my feeling, it's a sense of discriminatory, trying to focus on these two committees. Now, how about looking at the Kanagasaki, committee and the La Paz Central Committee? These are sister city committees, and I can argue they are the same. They should be, combined to save staff time. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in doing the efficiency argument, look across all committees without having picked two committees, and then use this kind of justification to justify the result of this elimination of the committee.
Okay.
I actually agree with that argument. I think you need to look across the town to look at this spectrum of committees and figure out the ways you can consolidate them logically. And that's I'm not sure who the super committee is that consolidates the committees, but it does seem like a process that we need to pursue.
Kay, Janice, and I want to, we'll go around for the committee for a minute, and then I want to call Dave and see if he wants to comment.
I appreciate the work that your committee did. I'm not convinced that the new committee would be unable to continue that work. I think it would be a good thing to actually have a committee that's looking at the whole range of needs for affordable housing, the same people looking at it all. And there's also the possibility on a committee like that to form subcommittees, so that a subcommittee could focus on particular issues to do with the homeless, while another one is looking at some other affordable housing issue. Even the Finance Committee has had subcommittees for specific purposes. So I'm not convinced that we need, I'm not convinced it's even the best model to have a committee that just focuses on homelessness. Because I see it as a continuum, and I'm sure you do too, really. If someone is chronically homeless, it can be placed in a better situation with more permanence, and the town is monitoring that all the way through. I think it would be good to have one committee looking at all that. The financial matter, though, which is our primary concern, yeah, I think it would help to consolidate some committees and reduce the amount of staff time that's spent with committees.
Do either of you have something else to say before David?
I just wanted to ask Wei-Ling if there were other financial implications besides the committee staffing, that we can think about?
Oh, I see. In terms of financial implications, the implication based on our experience again, also speak to case question about whether it's better to have one committee or two to address the needs of the homeless. I think I want to be very data driven and factually based, not to talk about my ideology. So in terms of financial impact, because the committee has been so effective in advocating for CDBG dollars to be allocated to address the needs of the homeless. So we present very strong proposals to help the town to receive CDBG funding at the state level. That's one. And we have, at the tally, it's about $800,000 so far, including $450,000 CDBG grant money in 2009 was allocated for the building of single occupancy housing with supportive service, a wraparound service for the people who have been homeless. So that's one, to address your issue. So in terms of case comment about what's better to provide service to provide housing. So the town has had the housing partnership, fair housing, since 1991. So it has been 20 years. So what's the track record of one committee to produce housing to meet the needs of the 50% area median income and the 30% area income households? So far, all the housing, affordable housing, quote unquote, produced by the housing partnership have been focused exclusively on the 80% area median income households. So therefore, those who have who are less than 80% area median income, they do not have the kind of housing at $750 range or $350 range. We don't have that in Amherst. So speaking from this historical perspective, we have had this housing partnership for 20 years, and yet we have a severe shortage of housing to meet the needs of those very low income and extremely low income. So besides the ideology, I want to emphasize it's really the evidence and historical record-based approach to address the concern that our committee has. So I would like to ask the Finance Committee perhaps to limit your discussion on the financial implications of this article rather than talking about your ideas, which committee will best address the needs of the low income or the homeless, because there is a lot of information from listening to you discuss this matter that I think will benefit from learning a little bit more about what the housing is available and what the needs are in the community. And so far, you don't have that piece of information to allow you to assess whether one committee is better or two committees are better.
Sure.
I'd like to clarify that our committee suggested to Town Hall that they look at the number of committees. Our committee has not been the committee to merge these particular two committees, yes, or any committee or any other committees. I mean, that's not our responsibility. I think one of the things we looked at is, as we went through our financial spring and different people came before us and we had a list of all the committees they supported, became evident that at some point we have staff that is overworked and we need to get a handle on it. So our suggestion was begin to look at committees. So I don't believe, at least I'm not making a judgment on how many committees there should or shouldn't be. That, to me, is strictly a town hall decision.
David?
Sure, just two quick comments. I think I'll hold off on anything substantial talking about committee numbers. I think that'll be happening as we begin to work with Mr. Pooler on budget preparation for FY13. I presume the whole issue of committees will come up. At last count, I think there was something on the order of 55. I often have very long conversations with my colleague Mr. Tucker about the number of committees that are functional area support, and all of those committees are doing wonderful work, but I think it is a very real issue, the amount of time and effort it does take. I am always intrigued. I've been with the town for 6.5 years, and each town meeting, spring town meeting, when we talk about the number of planners, and on a night like tonight, when 3 or 4 of our planners are out at committee meetings, I sit in the back room and my blood pressure goes up a little bit. So, you know, it's a challenging topic, and I hope to work with Mr. Pooler as we go through the budget process for FY13 to look at the number of committees. And I wanted to also say something about, I think the select board's process in looking at the housing partnership, Fair Housing Committee, and the Committee on Homelessness was really more about serving the needs of low-income people in the town of Amherst. That's really at the core of what their effort has been. They're in the midst of developing a charge. They spent a number of hours at meetings talking about that charge, and I think they're on the verge of finalizing that charge. So really, for them, their process has been about how can we serve, as you indicated, Kay, the spectrum of people who need housing, from people who are homeless to people who might be moving to this area with children, with small families, without single individuals. What do they need in terms of housing, and the entire spectrum? So I think it's we need to give that an opportunity to work and see how that new committee functions. There'll be some new ideas and some new energy, and I think there's a lot of people who want to get involved. We would be kicking that off as soon as the select board finishes the charge. So it's an opportunity for change and new energy and new ideas.
Okay.
I'd just like to point out that the Housing Partnership Fair Housing Committee was in fact a merger of 2 committees that had different charges, and is actually, if I'm remembering correctly, has kind of broadened what it does, or what those 2 committees did. At one point, Amherst had a rent control committee, and so that was found to be unconstitutional. So I think the history, you talk quite knowledgeably about the history of the 2 committees, but I think that's not all there is. I think there's a future and a new way of looking at things that we might benefit from, as we did by merging those other 2 committees 20 years ago.
Other questions? Seems to, I mean, it's hard to answer some of the other things that I would think about, because the charge, I think, really isn't fully developed and could be more fully developed through a process if this were passed at town meetings, so that it's sort of speculative and it's hard to make any judgments based on speculation. Really does get down to the question of whether there's a financial impact that would suggest that we take a position on it, and if so, then what is that financial impact lead us to?
I guess getting to Whaling's point about data and needing data, I think we're short of data on the impact of multiple committees and on staff time. That, you know, a way to calculate that, there is a way to put an equation together that spits out a number, but I don't think we have that data. So if I would suggest that our motion is no position on this. I think we can speculate that it has a deleterious effect on efficiency of some of our administration people, but I don't think we have a number. I'm open to arguments against that, but I think it's a hard number to calculate and to say firmly that it has a financial impact in the negative.
Janice?
Can we take no position and still make a comment? Can we do that?
I think we can. Since the committee can vote to do that. We're not making it, the motion be somewhere so that it has a little bit of direction. We're not taking a position on whether to recommend or not recommend the article, but we do point out that there are certain things that we suggest town meeting think about. I think that's entirely possible. It strikes me that when town meeting gets there, that there always is another possible action, which is a motion to refer, and that would give, if it is referred to back to the select board, let the select board have a chance to develop a charge of what would be the charge, and then come back to town meeting with something more specific. I don't know that we would be the committee that would want to make that motion. How? Yeah.
Well, I see this as a resolution of things that a committee would want to do, and until the committee had, if a committee were established and it had things to do that had monetary implications, then I would see a role for us in that. But I think since this is merely a resolution as to what they would like to happen, I don't see us taking a position on this. I would let town meeting take that position. And I would not, personally, I would not comment.
Okay.
I think the issue comes down to whether town meeting members think one committee with an adequate charge can do all the jobs, or whether there needs to be one specific committee for the homeless. And I may have my opinion, but I agree. I don't think the financial impact would probably to have two committees would probably require more staff time. So there would be a financial impact. I don't know what it would be, but there would be one, and it would be negative to the town. But so I'm of two minds, but I think no position is a defensible position.
Somebody wish to make a motion, Bob?
I'll move we take no position on Article 18.
Second.
Okay. There's been a motion that's made by Bob, second by Janice, to take no position. Further discussion? Wei-Ling?
If I just can make a final comment, I thank you for your very thoughtful discussion. And I just would like to say, as much as you want to think about the efficiency and how staff time can be saved and town money can be saved, I would like to ask you to look at the output by having committees, what they do, and in particular look at what the Committee on Homelessness has done. The fact it was able to produce a shelter after 20 years of talking about having a shelter, and we have been sending our homeless residents over the bridge to go to the Northampton Car Shelter, to go to Springfield, Worthington Street Men's Shelter, Worthington Street Women's Shelter, to go to Westfield Samaritan Inn, to go to Franklin County Emergency Shelter. We sent our homeless residents all over, up and down 91. So finally, we had a committee 4 years ago in 2007, to deal with homeless problem that we have had for so long, for over 20 years. We've been talking about having a shelter. So after 2 years of hard work into the committee's existence, a shelter was created. So the track record is good. So the reason this committee was dismantled, it's to our puzzlement. So therefore the committee felt there's so much more to be done. The goal of end homelessness, according to the regional plan, is to eliminate end homelessness by 2018, 10 years after the regional plan. So between now and then, if we continue to have one committee to do this array of housing, it sounds good ideologically, but think about yourself. When you go to doctors, man and woman, you don't say, I want to go to my gynecologist. No, 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 you're just a male, go to a doctor, it doesn't have to be gynecologist, a general doctor. A neurologist, no, you still just go to the general practice, you don't have to go to a specialist. So our idea is that because this is a very specialized problem and hasn't been solved, so that it's time to see a specialist. The time to see a generalist has passed, and we produce results. And we ask you to look at the results and continue to focus this problem until a solution is found. We cannot continue to send this homeless problem to a generalist committee.
I think that's your best argument so far to present to town meeting. That's a strong argument. I still think that our no position is the logical one for us to take, given our legacy of wanting to keep the town gears from getting too cobbed up with the committee process. So I support my own motion, but I recognize that comment as being a very valid and strong one.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, no hands. All in favor of the motion that's on the table indicate by raising hands. Okay, so it's, I think, 6-0, one member absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Before you got here, we met with LSSC staff and had substantial discussion about Article 3 and passed a motion to recommend Article 3. So that, I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add to Article 3, but it's really not necessary at this point. I think you have two people from LSSC who really, and plus Sandy, who provided tremendous information. Terrific. So thank you. However, we did not discuss Article 4.
Okay, be happy to do that. If I could, I'm hesitant to even mention one more thing about committees, but as a reminder to Mr. Pooler and myself, going back to what Bob was talking about in terms of quantifying staff time put into committees, I'm going to kick myself later for saying that. We can actually do it. I mean, you can take the number of meetings, the frequency of the committee meetings, finance, Concom, planning board, whatever, come up with a number for the average meeting, the average amount of staff preparation time, the number of staff that go, and extrapolate over a year. And we certainly, that would be a lot of work, but it might be very informative in the budget process for FY13 to take a look at that. I can say, again, with all confidence that our functional area, those numbers, I think would be very interesting to see. It's a huge number of hours.
I don't care how you look at it. I'm sorry.
So anyway, I'll go to our.
Okay.
I don't think we should ask you to do that. I don't think we should ask you to do that. However, if during the budget development process, it would be useful for managers to do that for themselves, to present to us later, that would be, I'm sure we would be receptive.
Well, this is our first round of budget preparation with Mr. Pooler, and I don't know if he had that idea already, but now he does, and I'm sure he'll get an email tomorrow. So, well, thank you very much. I'll be fairly brief on the Puffer's Pond. I believe you have the grant application that we sent in.
Paper copies are coming for people though.
So we have kind of, if you will, a very similar situation to the War Memorial grant. Many months ago, like the War Memorial effort, staff got together after a very extensive volunteer process. You may recall Mr. Musanti and I worked to put together, actually it was Mr. Musanti's idea to call it Puffer's Pond 2020, this volunteer group to really look at this wonderful resource we have in North Amherst, which clearly is in need of some help. It is overused. understaffed, undercared for, and really, so the Puffers Pond 2020 group came up with a list of recommendations that went to the Conservation Commission and then to the Select Board, and they are now memorialized, if you will, on our website with a whole series of recommendations and potential costs. Out of those recommendations, we filtered what we thought were the most urgent and came up with the grant proposal that you have before you. We boiled it down to $370,000. This does not include dredging. That is a whole nother issue that we will be facing if we want Puffers Pond to remain a wonderful swimming and recreation area that it is, recreating area that it is. So the budget you have before you in the grant totals $370,000. Again, as Mr. Pooler and others probably told you, the park grant is a one-time per year application. It's a 70-30 state local match. So we are looking at a state portion of the 370 of $259,000. The town share would be $111,000. And in a best case scenario, we would be before town meeting if we are successful in getting this grant, and know that by November 7th or thereabouts, when this hits the floor of town meeting, the ask would be for the entire amount, but $259,000 would be reimbursable. You'll notice in the grant that this is also a design-build grant. In the first year, we would spend some more time with engineers looking at things like erosion, how do we abate and stop and work to make sure the beaches remain usable for a long, long time, that the Mill River is not continuing to erode some of the land area around Puffers. Likewise, we look at some of the trail erosion. We'd also look at a more sustainable parking plan. I'm sure that most people who know Amherst well in the late spring and early summer know what State Street is like on a busy day. It's unsafe, it's not sustainable. We have people parking every which way. There's no order, no rhyme, no reason. So we look at the entire traffic plan and parking plan. And in the grant, it would actually cover the creation of a new approximately 50-car parking area, ecologically designed, well-designed, up near the Ruxton gravel pit, away from the Cushman Brook and the pond. This would not be in addition to already existing parking. This would take the place of some of the rather uncontrolled parking along State Street. So, again, a design build, a reimbursement grant, $370,000 total, $111,000 would be the ask to free cash. And I will say that if we do not get the grant, we would ask that this article be dismissed or referred back to the Conservation Commission, and we would hopefully come back and resubmit next year to the state folks. So I think I'll stop there and maybe take questions.
Just could you let me go back?
Yep.
You said a design build. What were the three things you just listed? Sorry.
Design build.
Mm-hmm.
It is again a 2-year. So in the first year, about $35,000 in design. Second year would be the construction. The grant total is $370 with $259,000 from state, $111,000 for the town share. The ask essentially would be, if we get the grant, that the $111,000 come from available free cash. If we know going into town meeting that we do not have the grant, then we would ask that the article be referred back or dismissed, because we don't feel that it's prudent right now to move forward with that large number of 370 as an ask. I will say that this is like a War Memorial Pool. We feel that this is really a one-time, long-term capital investment, if you will, in Puffers that will last for many, many years. And it's the reason we're bringing it to fall town meeting is the state's grant cycle is this time of year. And we can't wait to spring to deal with this because they want an answer in the fall, or they'll award the money to some other community.
Okay.
I just want to point out that it's actually in the article, contingent upon award of grant application. So not a lawyer, I don't know exactly what that means, but I interpreted it as meaning that if the grant wasn't
Correct.
awarded, this wouldn't go
We don't
forward.
go forward, correct.
Do you wanna know what Joint Capital Planning Committee?
Yeah, I just second, and I'll ask a question. I just point out to the committee that there was a reason to appropriate the full 370, even though if the grant comes, we would be reimbursed for a large portion of it. That was basically the state agency that administers it requires us to do so. Kay, was there? Well, we're in here, what it says is that we're appropriating and transfer $370,000 from free cash.
You have to fund the grant up front, and then you get
Right.
reimbursed later.
Right.
And that money would then flow back into free cash at the close of FY12.
And following that, it says contingent upon the grant.
Yes.
So,
But we do need to just be prepared in writing this up to explain that yes, in fact, we would be taking $370,000 from free cash if this is funded by the state, but that doesn't mean that it's a permanent reduction of free cash by that amount. Just some explanation is in order, and I wanted to make that clear. Okay, was there a recommendation from JCPC?
there was. It was, the vote was 5-0, with one person abstaining and 2 absent to recommend it. The discussion, that was with the understanding that it wouldn't go forward if the grant wasn't received. And the person who abstained didn't like the idea of creating a parking lot and having to walk further to get to the pond.
Okay.
Is that your recollection? That was.
Yeah, largely. I mean, I think that was a concern. They felt there were open questions around some of those design things that create some trepidation for them.
Yes, David?
2 other quick additions. One is, it's very clear from working with Mr. Fuller and Mr. Musanti that the town's #1 priority with regard to the park grants really is for Memorial Pool. And so I think that has been and will continue to be clear throughout our presentations on this article. You may note also that there is a brief reference to transfer and/or dedicate all or a portion of the aforementioned properties. We're still talking with the State Department of Conservation Services about this, and we're working with Town Council. Essentially, we feel as though the property, when acquired by the town, part of it was acquired through acquisition, actually purchase, and there's a number of parcels there. Some of them were gifts. Our sense is that they came to the town both for active and passive recreation. This is a grant program that typically funds active recreation, and we're working with the folks at the Park Grant Program to really help us understand that a little bit more and help them understand how the land came to us and how it's been used, and hopefully a transfer of this land, say from any sort of conservation use to recreation use, wouldn't be needed. And so we've got a couple of weeks here before town meeting meets, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that with the state folks.
Other questions, Doug?
A couple of things. Have you a more specific date? I mean, it's sort of end of October. Is there a fixed deadline that they report back to you about the grant, or do they say, kind of near the end of the month kind of thing? Or
well, really, we're at the whim of the state in terms of their process. They're usually quite timely with these grants. I must say, my experience is they're quite timely. So I am confident that we'll have some word. We might even, if they have not finished their process, and we would probably reach out to them in the first week of November and say that, our town meeting is days away. If you could give us some indication, even if it's no, better to have the answer going into town meeting.
if I could follow up.
Yes, go ahead.
The other thing I've been thinking about with regard to both this and the other project, while the the park grant cycle is, you know, a submission for news in and around this time of year, which is off cycle from our budget process. Some of what's driving this, I think, is the fact that you know, the portions that are funded by us, the 30%, seem slightly more affordable right now because of some good news we have around revenue. And so I think that's also, to be, you know, sort of fully honest with town meeting, we may want to state clearly to them is that some of the motivation to do it off cycle is it matches up with the state cycle. But by the same token, the component that we're going to use to fund this, we know we kind of have cash in hand for this. It's not that it could not have happened last spring. It just seemed at that time, because we didn't know how the fiscal year would end, what would happen with revenues in the coming year, that we would be in a spot that would help us as much as this does. So this is, in some ways, it's fortuitous timing to be off cycle on this, because our local financial picture has some opportunity in it, you know, versus and we certainly think about it, that money for the town share in context relative to just keeping it in reserves and or you know, putting it into the OPEB trust fund or what have you. So we're definitely thinking about those kind of things, but in some senses our fortuitous circumstances allow us to be active in pursuing in the current cycle these two projects, which is, and again, speaking to the number one project, that's the pool. You know, as Mr. Buller stated earlier, you know, the town meeting was definitely very clear in its intentions in the spring about its feelings about the pool. So, you know, I think that sets it clear, and obviously we know just from the usage, as you stated earlier, at Amherst, and the long history with the Puffers 2020 and previous, you know, the community's feeling about that property, that these are not pie in the sky, out of nowhere sort of projects either. So I don't want this, you know, my bringing up the fact that we're in a fortuitous circumstance, and that to in any way diminish the value of these two projects. So.
Okay.
This is a question for you, Sandy. If both of these are approved, we're actually adding to this year's capital budget that we passed in town meeting. So we will be using a larger percentage of the levy for capital this year. I don't know what it is. So I'm hoping that you can
Figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least in the projections that you gave the select board, all four boards earlier, we're planning to still, or your assumption is that we would use 6.5% of the levy again next year, but I think that this, we should revise this year's capital budget to show these two if it goes through.
But just on that point, I guess one of the reasons I would support this strongly is just for that reason. I mean, if we've been chronically underfunding our capital budget, it comes back to haunt us always in ways that we don't expect. This is clearly one of those assets in town that needs to be supported. This is a way to leverage support, and finding a way to put this into the capital budget certainly seems like a 3x on your investment, and makes a lot of sense. I guess I had a question for Dave, in that there's been a private fundraising effort for Puffers going on in town, hasn't there? Or has that been just a study? I thought they were actually trying to raise money.
No, primarily that effort is by a group called Friends of Puffers Pond, and they've been around for 20 or more years. And they're a wonderful group, and their primary focus is raising funds for annual maintenance. You may recall that 3-4 fiscal years ago, we in Conservation lost about $15,000 in funding for summer staff, in part to maintain Puffers Pond and the trails. And so Puffer's Pond 2020 has stepped up their fundraising, and they raise a couple of $1,000s every year. It will never reach, I don't think it'll reach the level of $15,000. So this year I think it was about $2,500. So that typically goes toward trash removal, some trail maintenance, and summer staff. We hire college students and high school students to help us maintain the area, to do some policing of the area as well. But it's pretty minimal.
Okay.
Back to capital for a minute. Again, this is off cycle from our usual process. These are big projects given the capital budget. Even just the town share of it would be a big hunk out of a capital budget. And we know that there's other big capital projects, the dredging of Puffer's Pond. You've had that on our radar for years, at least I think almost the whole time I've been on the JCPC, and we know that's going to happen. So there is competition for this money. So I just want people to be aware that we're doing these two projects instead of something else. There's this fire station out there that.
Well, I guess that I assumed that that's why this was supposed to go to JCPC before it came to the Finance Committee and then on to town meeting, because that is a committee that includes representation from all of the components of government that participate in joint capital planning. And the fact that there was unanimous support.
Not quite.
With one abstention. But it still was, there was no negative votes, is an indication, I would assume, that all of the participants in the JCPC process had a chance to talk about this and agreed that it's an appropriate expenditure, therefore appropriate to add to the capital plan under an emergency basis. Doug?
If I could just to piggyback on that, I think there was a general comfort level around the projects themselves and how they fit within the context of the whole of JCPC. But I think the other factor that also played into that, which helps mitigate this instead of something else, is the fact that if we get the grants, that 70%, 30% is a huge advantage, and that financial windfall, as it were, not really windfall. Those kinds of things do accelerate projects on the capital schedule.
Yeah,
they do, because that then affords us that the 70% we can prorate over time on a whole lot of other things in subsequent years. So those things do, I think, play out and did play out in people's minds and in the committee discussion and their thinking about it.
Yes, Dave.
However you decide to vote, I did just want to add too that I've been really so pleased. This is really, both these grants for Puffers and War Memorial have really been a collective effort. I mean, we brought together LSSC, DPW, conservation planning, and it's that kind of spirit in tough times that has resulted in 2 quality proposals. Whether we get one or both or none, it's it's in response to well documented, well-articulated community needs for War Memorial and for Puffer's Pond. And if we don't get these grants, we're going to go back at it and go for some other funds out there. So one of these might come back in a subsequent year. And as I've said, we really haven't touched the issue of the dredging, which is a more complicated project from a permitting standpoint. But that will come down the line a piece. But I'm very proud. I mean, what we put together with LSSC and DPW and the other departments is pretty outstanding. I think we've only gotten, this used to be called the self-help program. I think we've only gotten 1 or 2 self-help grants in the history of the program, thanks in large part to Mr. Westover and past conservation commissions. I think we've gotten 44 self-help grants. So this was urban self-help for parks and recreation, and we've gotten 44 self-help grants for land acquisition. So we need to get more of these to kind of even the playing field here.
Sorry, one other thing.
Yes.
If I may. there was another concern from some people on JCPC about putting a recreation restriction on lands. You already talked about that a little bit, that with buffers it's complex, so it may or may not happen. But that's the plan for the War Memorial Pool area. And I think, I mean, the thing that convinces me is we've put conservation restrictions on land all the time. I mean, the town's done that for a long time. So I see the recreation restriction as similar.
Anybody wish to make a motion? Doug?
I would be delighted to move to recommend Article 4.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table that has been made by Doug and seconded by Bob to recommend Article 4. And we've had substantial discussion. I'll just give a second to see if there's anybody who has anything else burning to say. Seeing no hands for that, then we'll go immediately to a vote. All in favor of the motion indicate by raising hands. 6, so 6-0, 1 member absent. And thank you very much. And despite our comments earlier about committees, I do want to say that I really think that the 2020 committee that you referred to earlier was really a tremendous effort. And maybe it was because it was a one-time effort with Sunset, but it really was a great effort, and I think has helped us tremendously to get to where we are.
Yes. That might be a model to look at for the future, that we have these committees with a clear beginning, middle, and end, and they go after and come up with a project or a recommendation and see it through, and then that committee is first.
It's easier to find people to serve.
Yeah.
LSSE, DPW, and who else?
The Conservation Department and the Planning Department.
So,
Fire stations.
what
Okay, thank
we
you.
need to do then, I think, thank you, is Articles 1, 2, and 3, and I think we will have acted then on all other articles.
6.
6.
Oh, 6, you're right. Since that's the most, should we go to 6 next?
Do we have any
Okay.
others?
1 and 2, I think. Do you have notes that we've taken position?
We did
We did
2.
two.
We
We
did
did not
2.
do 1.
We did 2, okay. Next, we usually, I mean, we can do that real quick. We normally do support 1 if you go back through the history. And I'm trying to think why. I think it's mostly because it names the Finance Committee in there, and the Finance Committee normally does reports, so therefore it would sort of be in bad form not to support hearing from ourselves.
Move approval. Second. Oh, move recommending.
Okay, so we have Mary Lou moving to recommend Article 1 and seconded by Janice. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by raising hands. 6. Then that's 6-0 with 1 member absent. And since I now stand corrected, though I don't have a vote recorded, that we did Article 2 in case better note taker, and therefore I go on to Article 6. Andy.
Okay. This is a recommendation to increase the the stabilization fund. Just want to see the language. A sum of money, right. So, since the time we drafted the warrant article, John and I have had a chance to talk about how much money we think we should recommend to you for putting in the stabilization fund. And our thinking is it would take of the $514,000 that we're getting from this one-time money from the state, our recommendation would be to put $400,000 of that into capital stabilization. That would then bring capital, excuse me, I keep saying capital stabilization because I used to have a capital stabilization fund, and I always put those two words together, into the stabilization fund, excuse me. That would move the stabilization, which is right now at $1.4 million, to $1,821,401, and it would mean that the combination of stabilization and free cash this year would be at 8% of our current budget. It's currently at, after the latest free cash numbers came in, it's currently at 7.5, and last year it was at 6.5. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. 8% happens to be a nice round number, but also I think we wanted to, it's close to the same dollar amounts that are in the capital policy for if free cash is over 5%. Then it also just leaves a little bit of that money left over in case for some reason, we have a bad snow winter or something, that it gives us just a little bit of cushion. So that is why, that's a rationale behind the number. But I do think it's an opportune time to continue to build up our reserves, and would recommend we do that. I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Questions?
I like 8%. That's a good number.
One of the things that I just wanted to get onto the record of this meeting, and also as a statement to the public, since this is on Amherst Media, is that this committee had a significant discussion earlier this year with the intention of continuing that discussion about our OPEB obligation. And that we were presented with the suggestion by the subcommittee that we at least give some thought to immediately placing money into the OPEB trust. And there are all sorts of strong reasons for doing that, which I think this committee knows about and we've talked about before. But it has to do all substantially with just recognizing that this is a long-term obligation of the town, and that this is money that the town owes to employees who are either past or present employees. It is compensation that they were promised but is not being paid for presently unless we do something to pay for it presently. But it's a complex issue, and it's complex because it also involves the regional schools, and for all of those reasons, we didn't feel quite ready to go to town meeting to recommend immediately putting money into the OPEB trust. But I think that it would be important to remind town meeting through our report that setting money aside for this purpose is very important, and by placing the funds into the stabilization fund, we want to send out a very strong signal that the money is being placed in a location where it is not to be thought of as supplementing operating budgets, but is to be held until we can develop, at least until we can develop an OPEB policy, with the possibility that a portion of it or all of it might eventually be transferred. So I wanted to just make sure that that thought process is part of our discussion, and if there's agreement, to make sure that it becomes, at least to some extent, a part of the statement on a motion. Okay.
I agree, that's my intention when I vote for this. I think that would be a good place to put it. Legally, town meeting could vote by a 2/3 majority to take it out for any reason. So we were aware of that. I think we're all aware of that. And also, I think that's why I think we should put it into stabilization, because it would take a 2/3 vote. If we just accepted it and it went into free cash, we'd still have reserves of 8% of the operating budget, but it would be easier to appropriate it because it would just be a majority vote. So, yeah, I think we ought to put it in this more difficult to get at spot until we have a firm way of starting to fund the OPEB problem, other post-employment benefits.
It does take 2/3 vote to put it into
Yes,
the
it
fund
does take
too.
2/3.
We have not, when we've made this recommendation in prior times, it has not been a close vote, but it does require 2/3 to put it in or take it out. So questions are, we've talked about this for a little bit, but the one thing that's new is the recommendation of 400,000, which gets back to the question, well, gee, why not 500,000, since that's the amount of additional money that we didn't know we were getting in the spring when we adopted a budget. And Janice?
Yeah, I guess along those same lines, if we do go with just the 400,000 going to stabilization, the other 114,000, I would like to be very careful on how it's spent. And hopefully that will remain in free cash, and we could put that aside for stabilization or OPEB in the spring, or when we have a better idea of what's going on.
Okay.
The other thing I forgot is we're going to pass this article. If we pass it, then we've appropriated $400,000 into the stabilization fund, whether we get the extra state aid or not. Are we going to have do you think we'll have,
by October 31st, the state will notify us, and the motion will make specific that it will be from that source.
oh, okay, from that source.
Yeah.
All right. So should that be in our,
It can be. Though, because, yes, I think can be and should be, because it is going to be our motion on town meeting floor. I did send all of you an item that I didn't want to discuss tonight, which is just the draft of the narrative section of the report, and I touched on some of these themes in there and mentioned this. So this has always been the chair's prerogative to write that section, but I did want to open up the process a little bit more than I have in the past, and my predecessors have in the past, by inviting review and comments from members of the committee. But I did just want to point it out because it comes up now. This is the subject this additional money is covered there. We do anticipate it when I make the oral report to town meeting that under Article 1, certainly I hope to be able to report to town meeting that we in fact have received the money. But that's part of, those are the things that have to be reserved until then.
Where is the 114,000 going?
It's a little bit unclear at this point because the state hasn't told us exactly how it's going to work, but I'm assuming that what will happen is it will just come in as excess revenue and become part of free cash at the end of FY12. It isn't clear to me whether, just to Janice's point, whether it will be available for appropriation at spring town meeting, or if it just, because once you set the tax rate, if it's just considered general revenue, you can't then appropriate it again at spring town meeting. You could appropriate free cash, but new revenue couldn't be appropriated, so it would just fall to free cash. But it would give us some cushion in since we know it's free cash that's coming.
Okay.
It gives us a little cushion so that if we want to take 114,000 out of free cash for a particular purpose in the spring, whether it's to, as I said, because we had a bad winter, or because we wanted to put it into OPEB, or because there's some other purpose, then we could do it with a little bit of confidence, knowing that money is there and that we're not really drawing down our existing free cash balances, if that makes sense.
So the only thing is, I guess my concern would be that when you use it in free cash, let's say we do in the spring, then the question is, why can't we use some more of it?
Well,
I mean, I think we're going to have an answer for that. I'm not asking you to come up with that tonight, but we've kind of said, well, we're not going to use that for annual budgets.
Right.
And so if you can use that, unless we say, well, it was a cushion, came in the fall, and we're now going to use it. We plan to do that. But I think we have to be careful about that.
I agree. And I think any recommendation for spending in the spring, I think, would have to be for some extraordinary purpose. Because I think you're right. I think it's better to hold the line and not try to spend that money if we can help it.
This is a discussion that we really need to have substantially on November 3rd as a part of developing the guidelines that we're going to recommend. But the whole question of what revenue we assume is available, whether we're envisioning any expenditure of free cash or transfers from the stabilization fund to support the FY13 operating or capital budgets, is a discussion that needs to start that evening. And as we have in the past, if we take that position as we did last year, that this is not a year where we think it's appropriate, then we have to develop a budget to recommend to town meeting that is based upon the amount of money that we assume is available, which is nothing from free cash or stabilization. Last year, town meeting, after deliberation, decided to take approximately $65,000 of free cash nonetheless for what it considered to be a very high priority. That is a prerogative of town meeting, and they did take that action. I think we would, at that point, if we have decided that that is our position, would be strongly advising against, as we did last year, and stating the reasons why. That's kind of the nature of the beast. This is ultimately a town meeting action. But I think we're back to Article 6, and no other questions, then we need a motion. Okay.
I move that we recommend appropriating $400,000 from, what is that called? What's the additional state aid, or
Yes.
From additional state aid into the stabilization fund? Second.
I'm just writing something down. So the motion was made by Kay, seconded by Janice. Were you asked to be
No, I'm
recognized?
waiting.
Then we're going to vote. All in favor indicate by raising hands. So it's 6-0. And since it's now our motion, I'm going to assume that we're also recommending it. Therefore, I won't make that separate thing, because it's just clear on its face.
The sewer extension we deferred to town meeting.
Yes. It's part of acting on, I don't think we know anything more about.
Right, Article 11.
And, yeah, that's the one that we deferred.
Yeah, and of course, I do need to send you another letter that the committee received today that I just didn't get a chance to take care of on the issue that's sort of really hanging up there, which is the betterment question. So I think that we can continue to defer that. And actually, I don't. We said we deferred at the town meeting, but that we would try and take it up on November 3rd. So I think what we had said, that we're avoiding a meeting on the town meeting night to do it in a compressed amount of time. Okay.
Article 17, the village center zoning. The zoning board, The planning board, I understand, voted on that last night. Sandy, do you know how they voted?
You know, I don't know. I've asked, I didn't see Jonathan today. I know Andy had sent us both a memo. I asked Dave Zomek too, but I haven't heard. I just don't know.
Because if we end up, we recommended and they don't, that would be
Awkward.
Do we want to reconsider and just leave it open till town meeting? I agree with Kay, I think it would be extremely awkward.
Yeah. Unless we can ask somebody to volunteer to make a phone call to like John O'Keefe or somebody who would have an answer. I don't know if John's up the street though.
Is Rob Crowder on the planning board?
I don't know. I've never been to a planning board meeting.
He is.
Because he's up at town hall right now.
Yeah, I know.
could run up and ask.
Do you want my report on the first quarter?
Yeah, you could do that quickly and.
No, I'll do it.
But we need you.
Distance.
No, you
We
don't.
need-
I heard this already.
Okay.
So if you'd like, I could report on first quarter
Yes,
results.
go ahead. So this is an item that arises under sort of the news affecting budget, our new information section. The agenda.
So you'll notice right off the bat, it's so new that it's, we're actually jumping ahead of time, is that the memo is dated October 24th. That was the date that we're presenting it to the select board, but it then occurred to me yesterday, well, finance is meeting, why don't we just give it to finance? So this is a comprehensive report. It is, the short recap of it is that our spending and our revenues are on target for where they should be after the first quarter. We're 25% through the year. We've collected 27.8% of our revenue, although some of that is timing issues. And we've spent 25.7% of our budget, but some of that is also timing, including some encumbrances. Without the encumbrances, we've spent only 24.9% of the budget, so in all respects, we're on target. So I'll just walk through this quickly. One of the things about the first quarter report is you are early in the year and a lot of things haven't quite happened yet, so things are a little bit funny. For example, you can see this on the front page. It's also on the second page. It has all the numbers on it. You see that the Department of Recreation has collected 94.9% of its revenue. Well, they really haven't. It's just that there's a transfer from the revolving fund that gets put in at the beginning of the year and is assumed. So that throws that number off, and so we wanted to note that. Investment income looks low at only 8%. That's because it reflects only 2 out of the 3 months of reporting, and otherwise we think that investment income is on track with what our projections are. Miscellaneous non-recurring is another area that's a little bit wacky. This represents cherry sheet charges that come over from the schools. We haven't billed them yet for their teacher retirement and so forth, so that's again a timing issue. Motor vehicle excise is on target with previous years. It's very low because the major bill for that goes out in February, so you don't really know anything about motor vehicle excise until February. Other excise, the 149 that's collected reflects the first quarter distribution of our hotel motel tax. And so that is running slightly ahead of projections for the year. And we still don't have the Lord Jeff on. So later in the year, we will see that continue to go up. So that's good. Again, the pilot is low because it's a timing issue. Those transfers, there's a big transfer from the enterprise funds that goes in there. That doesn't happen until the second quarter. Property taxes, which is the biggest and most important, we're collecting apace with where it should be for the year to have a good, strong collection rate. And our state aid is coming in basically the way we expected. On the expenditure side, there are two items that look like they're big expenditures. IT, because they do encumber a lot of their contracts at the beginning of the year. So it looks like they've spent half their money, but that's only because we've locked up their money in contracts we know are going throughout the year. And our employee benefits look like we spent 63.5% of that, but that is because we paid our entire Hampshire County retirement system assessment at the beginning of the year. By doing that, we got approximately a 1% discount on the total. And so that it isn't, we're really not spending beyond our means on that. So I think the general news is if you take all those other sort of anomalies out, our general revenue is on target, and our spending, department by department, is on target. The enterprise funds all look pretty good, and we're consistent with where they've been in previous years. So it's just 1 quarter's worth of data, but nothing is standing out at this time as looking like there are any significant problems. Happy to answer any questions about the specifics.
Trying to figure out what the, not getting the big ones, but I'm looking for seasonal ones. How to interpret the outdoor pool operations in Cherry Hill, given the fact that those are heavily dependent upon season, and they're not going to do much for us in the next 2 quarters.
No. Let's see. I went back and looked at the last 3 years of revenue on each of those to see where they stand. They are both a little bit below what the numbers have been for the last 3 years, although in each case for the last 3 years for Cherry Hill and for Swim, there were years where there was some unusual bump up in one of those 3 years. So it makes the averages a little bit deceptive. I am scheduled to sit down with Linda and talk about first quarter results for all of her programs in the next week or so, because I really want to take a look at them with a fine-tooth comb and try to make sure I understand what the dynamics are behind the revolving fund and Cherry Hill and so forth. So that's still to come. We'll still take a look at that. I don't have any specifics to report tonight on that. I've just looked at the trend data so far. And I've gone over these numbers with Sonia, and asked her, from her experience with these, if she saw there was anything that stood out as a problem, and she felt that we're basically consistent with where we've been in similar points in previous years.
Other questions from other members of the committee? Well, thank you very much. It's very helpful. And at this point, is there any other news affecting budget type items?
No, you and I both attended the Association of Town Finance Committee meeting and heard from John Robertson and Pam Coker about how collections are going this year. Basically, there was no new news from them other than to say that I think what I've reported at the board meeting is that state collections are running ahead of their estimates for the year. So state revenue is coming in very strongly. It gives us hope that they'll be able to fund some increases in local aid because of that.
Yeah, which is amazing considering that today's New York Times on the national page has an article about the large number of states that are coming in the other way on their revenue projections.
Oh, yeah. No, Massachusetts is, we're relatively much better off than a lot of the country in our economy.
Okay. Kay, did you find out an answer to the question?
They voted to recommend 5-2 with 1 abstention.
Were you able to get into any conversation to flesh that out farther?
No, I had to interrupt a conversation to get that.
There are 2 options. Option 1 is to leave it as we have it recommended and proceed. It was a very close vote in this committee. The other option is to ask to reconsider with the intent to then defer to town meeting so that we have an opportunity to get a copy of the planning board report and consider what the majority and minority positions were, and then revote and not include this in our written report that we're going to be mailing next week.
Since I voted in the majority, I would move to reconsider our vote to recommend.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor from Mary Lou to move, she moves to reconsider our position. And
you want a time certain on that until town meeting?
Well, I think that would have to be the next motion. You could say that you would, if your motion to reconsider passes, you would intend to then follow it up with a motion to defer to town meeting, but I think you need to take it as 2 separate motions. At this point, there has to be a second to the motion, or it's not on the table. Seeing no second, then I'm going to say that.
I'll second it.
Okay, then Kay has seconded the motion.
She seconded, she was in the minority.
That's a good question, I don't know.
We don't really have a policy that says that that I'm aware of, that we have to follow Robert's rules, which is where that standardly comes from.
I think she can vote. I think she can second, even if she voted in the minority. But the person who moves to reconsider is the person who voted with the majority.
Yeah, I will accept that as a reason, and also note that I'm still not aware that there's any requirement that town committees or this committee have bound themselves specifically to Robert's rules. And so therefore I don't have to run home and get my copy of Robert's rules that I was given when I took over this chair of the National Legal Services Committee many years ago.
It's a great book. It is.
No, we operate under modified rules of Robert's Rules.
So I have therefore made her come to the conclusion that we do have a valid motion on the table, and it is a motion to reconsider. And this is relative to the previous motion that we've taken to support Article 17.
I want to speak to my motion.
Yes.
I agree with Kay. I think we need to hear more from the planning board and see what the issues are for them. And once we know, then I think we will have more reasons to vote one way or the other.
Where will their issues be financial issues relevant to our vote, though? Unlikely, I think.
I don't know. No. Yeah. Okay.
In previous years, we haven't wanted to take a position on zoning articles till we've seen the planning board report.
And that's really a question of being adequately informed about the motion, about what it is that we're voting on, because the planning board usually provides most detail. This time we've had substantial additional detail provided to us in advance because it's so unusual, so controversial. So I think that we are, in this time we've really know enough that we can write the report. In fact, there already is a draft floating. So it's not necessarily clear that this is going to make a difference on the financials. I guess the additional thing I would think about is what's the harm, because if we can find out by November 3rd, vote on November 3rd, and then take if we stay where we are, and take what's already written, and it can be distributed through the website and on the back table, and we will have supplemented our report. And so I'm not sure we've wasted that effort. That's what we do. I think at this point, just need to hear if there's any other discussion people want to have on the reconsideration. Okay, then I will ask for a vote. All in favor of reconsideration indicate by raising their hand. This is a problem. All opposed indicate by raising their hands. Then I think the motion fails on the 3-3. And we are where we are. So that, I think, concludes it, other than we, Kay, do we have any sections that we still need to assign that you're aware of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. I've got to see if I have that cheat sheet where I started writing this down.
Article 3, though I heard Mary Lou volunteer.
I don't completely understand it if I have to talk about the, well, other than saying that it's the deed thing is required, that the LSSE take over the care, custody, and control. That's all I have to say to that. And would David explain the legality of all that?
At town meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure. he will.
Okay, then I'll do 3.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. This, this isn't going to be our motion. It's the select board's motion, I believe.
Oh, we don't have to.
There could be more to be said that we think it's a good idea because of the.
It's just like.
Oh, right, I have that, all the
Yeah.
good reasons for
Yeah,
it.
we could speak to it on the financial piece, but we don't have to speak to it on the land transfer piece. That was the only point I was pointing out, that if anybody's going to have to speak to that issue, we can leave that to the select board. Thank you, Mary Lou. Article 1 is just a sentence, so that's really already done, since we do it every year. Puffer's Pond.
Oh, hey, I already did that.
That's right, you did do Puffer's Pond, so therefore we'll assign it to you. That takes care of that one very easily. Transfer to stabilization.
Excuse me, 2 is who?
Oh, we did that one
No, I know, but who's doing it?
2 is, Kay, didn't you
Yeah,
do it, Kay?
I did it.
Okay.
And I think the other one that you did was, that Kay did, because of just being a good person she is, she's already done a draft of 6.
Okay. Are we on 5 now? Are we going in order here?
5, I had volunteered to do at the
Okay.
last meeting.
And 6 is K?
6K is done already.
Except for the
And
number.
Yeah, well, 7 was assigned to K. 8, which we just heard about tonight, abandoned property, which is one that Claire was talking to us about, has not been assigned, so we need a volunteer for there. Janice?
I could try it.
If you don't want
The
to.
select board will do the motion and the,
Yeah, so we just have to write something for the
okay.
report. It can be brief.
Decreases staff time and decreases expense of legal ads.
Yeah,
Well,
there you go. She's already.
Dead.
11 sewer extension we have deferred.
Wait, who's doing 9 and 10?
Me.
9 and 10 is Janice.
And I
Send it today,
emailed
I
you.
Yeah.
haven't looked at it.
It's short.
Anything else there? Well, the next one we're going to get to Doug because he hasn't come up yet.
all the easement ones, 12, 13, 14.
Oh,
The
that's right. You
11?
did do
You did
them. That's
those.
right. You
These-
did.
The 11 is,
Okay.
We can do
anyone
that,
doing
yeah.
that?
It's deferred to town meeting. We haven't taken a
Okay.
position.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't taken a position on it yet, and I think that we need, at this point, it will be written up and submitted on the back table, as I just previously described.
Doug, you're doing easements?
Yep.
Doug
12,
has already
13.
done the easements. I stand corrected on that, and thank you, Doug. So then in the zoning map, Bob did,
Article 15? Oh, no, that's Doug.
I call 18,
16 you did.
16, 17, and I'm gonna do 18.
You want to do 18?
wait a minute,
I'll quote you.
I thought you were doing 16 and 17.
You do 17.
Volunteer free. What's that? You have 16 and 17 now.
I'll do 18.
And I'm going for
Great.
18.
Forms
Bob
on-
wants to.
Bob wants to do it.
It's like playing Monopoly, you gotta,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So that's the board
Long
member's
row.
place and what?
That's right.
Go to jail.
well, yeah,
Can't buy that
okay.
one though, right?
Income tax.
I think that there's already,
Luxury.
it's already in process, so I think we're set. Bob will do 18. Now, oh, we do have one other. We need to at least write something on the Committee on Homelessness.
That
That's
is 18 now.
Oh,
That's
that's 18.
18.
Oh, that's right. I
That's
get.
the
Yeah,
summary.
yeah, that's right, okay. So Bob's taking that, okay, great. Then we're set.
This is Doug.
12, 13, 14, 15.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have, since I have this draft. Oh my, if I corrected. Okay, I just want to make sure we have it all signed, and we do. And so then the next item on the agenda, I believe, is, yes.
Do we want to give speaking assignments now? Or do we want the people who wrote the things to be the speakers?
I presume that.
We're not,
Yeah.
we're not, except for one article, we're not really presenting the whole thing.
I think that's right. There is, the speaking assignments on this one are lighter because a lot of these, once we've written it up in the report, since we probably would not say too much more than we supported for the reasons stated in the report, or because we supported or whatever we recommend. The discussion of financial projections and initial discussion of preliminary budget guidelines. I put it on the agenda because I felt it was important if anybody had some burning questions they wanted to have come up. This will be the substantial discussion on November 3rd when we are there to establish the preliminary guidelines. But if there are questions that you think are important and that Sandy can give some thought to respond to when we meet next time, it would certainly be appropriate to bring those questions forward now.
I don't know if this would fit in here, but as we talk about OPEB and convincing people that this needs to be done, do we have any data from the last 5 years on how much that has cost the town, percentage of the budget? So if we look back 5 years ago and we looked at what we've been paying out of the budget, and then up to this year, can we see an increase in the percentage of our budget that goes toward those unfunded requirements?
Maybe let me
think about it first.
Yeah.
I don't need that now. I just wonder if we have that to be able to use as part of our discussion and part of our guidelines, possibly.
I would just note that chart 14 in the financial indicators report, and I have other copies. I brought paper copies in case people didn't have them.
Which one? Oh, the one you gave out?
Yeah.
I have it. You got it from yours. 14.
What it shows is from 2002 to 2011 what our total spending on health benefits and retiree benefits has been. And then we add them together to get total employee benefits. That spending for the retirement benefits is based on funding our current costs for retirement plus our unfunded liabilities. For the health insurance, it's just our current costs. It doesn't capture at all our unfunded liabilities because we haven't put any money aside. So.
Right, but I'm saying that it must have cost us something each year, even though money hasn't been put aside. We've appropriated money for that.
That's this.
Okay, and so what I'm trying to find is how much that appropriation has gone up over the last 5 years, so that you could see what percentage of the budget it was 5 years ago and what percentage of the budget it is today.
Sure, and I can, it does show those two on this chart as total salaries and benefits as a percentage of the budget, and it's hovered right around 55%. It's that blue line on the top of the.
But the number of employees has gone down, right?
But the number of employees has gone down. That's a very good point.
But if it's staying consistent, the question that we're going to be asked is then why are we trying to put so much aside if we can reasonably take it out of every year's appropriation?
And if I might.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I was going to suggest, I think another way to look at it and get a sense of that is we had an actuarial study done this last year. We had one done 2 years ago. And I haven't looked at that in a while, but I'm guessing that liability is different. And so we know in a 2 year period what it's changed. I don't know if it's as easy to tease out of this for people, but that one, which is a projection, similar set of assumptions that go into it, they're different, but not wildly different. You know, the number from 2 years ago was smaller. You can see what that percentage change has been just alone in that. You start to get a sense of the arc of the curve that we've been talking about. So I think that might be a way to get at how that's changing and how what happens is that, as you know, like you're saying, that the dollars for benefits is set steady, but as a percentage, but the number of employees has dropped. So that's one way to talk about it, but that's hard to sort of visualize, I think. But if you look at an actuarial study where it says, here's the actual calculation of what our liability is, here's our new calculation of what our liability is, and said just over this 2 year period it changed by this much money, we didn't put any of that much money away at all. I mean, I think that's a really sort of point blank way to get at how that's changing over time.
That report also did indicate substantial pay difference between pay-go and what happens with pay-go over time.
Right.
And that's what the problem is and that's where the answer is. And actually, Rick Hood raised that question this morning at the budget coordinating group meeting, and we started having a dialogue with him about that also, because he was reporting on the budget subcommittee discussions that at the schools. You know that healthcare costs are going up. You know that the number of retirees, given the fact of how many people are now so-called baby boomers and getting near retirement, will go up. So that the common sense answers, and I think that the common sense answer then translates into the actual data that is available, that this is an amount that will continue to grow at a very substantial portion, because right now pay-go is only paying for the people who have already retired. And while that is a sum that is growing, it is an amount that so far we've been able to incorporate in the budget. As healthcare costs go up and as the number of retirees increases, because so many people will be retiring over the next 10 years, that will balloon to the point where if we haven't done something, we may not be able, not we, because we won't be the finance committee at that point in time, our terms will be up, but future finance committees will not be able to come up with a budget that's going to support schools, library, and municipal services, because it's going to be paying what will then be a pretty huge commitment. And I think that the data is there from the studies, and that, I mean, we can come back to that. I think that that's really what the OPEB subcommittee was working with. Yes.
To follow up on that, and I understand all that and I agree with all that, but there are people who say they don't believe in projections, or what we saw a year ago when, I don't know what company came in and spoke with us. And I think those are the people that we have to have some hard data for besides just projections. What happened in the past, and how is that even growing in increments toward the future? And the fact that people are living longer, which means retirement is going, paying them retirement is going to be longer. I understand that, but I also have heard people say those projections, that they don't buy into them. And for some people, we have some convincing to do.
Bob?
That I agree, and I think that there's a whole discussion that centers around how you present this problem to town meeting in a cogent fashion, and I think that we're a long way from actually having that strategy defined, and it's one that's going to be challenging for Sandy, challenging for any of us who want to get involved and help. I'm not sure that it's a discussion we want to have now, because I think when we get to the actuarial tables that Doug is talking about, that actuarial study, which was part of that presentation, that's where you'll start to see this effect, and it'll incorporate your last 5 years, which I think is good data, to say here we are, bump, 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 and then show those parabolic changes. And how we present that town meeting is a very good question. It's a huge question, I think.
Well, I just thought maybe there was something as we can use to begin to educate people in our guidelines about what we're looking at into the future too, as well as next year.
No, I think it's a good suggestion. It may be that it's something we need to incorporate in our report in a different way at when we do our major report at the annual town meeting. We may need to think about that. Janice, you had something, and then I was going to report on the BCG meeting part of this discussion.
I agree with Mary Lou. I think that people most of them can understand projections and actuarial tables and all, but when you have actual numbers that have actually been the costs for the last several years, I think people see that more easily and more real. So I would suggest to go along with Mary Lou's suggestion.
Well, so I think that the request then is that if it is feasible, and it may not be, we understand, but if it is, if you could come up with the actual pay-go amounts for each year, what we've been, because we have been allocating funds, it is a line in the budget, and if we could see if there's a trend to that, that would be helpful to have at the earliest possible time. The other thing I was going to say is that there was discussion at the BCG meeting about this, and this actually was one, if you read the summary points that I sent to you late in the day, it was one of the commitments of the budget coordinating group this year to have this discussion as a budget coordinating group to assist in this discussion. It was very carefully worded because really it is our discussion, but it was the idea was is that we would get the town, school, and library people who are representatives on the budget coordinating group to have some of this discussion and to start trying to help develop the understanding, which I think is very important because unless we either form a townwide committee or some kind of townwide commission, something like either the long-term planning committee that Bob co-chaired with Martha Hanner or something like Brookline did, I don't know that we have a community process that really is geared to educating the community. Anything else on, for this initial discussion right now, or questions that you would want to pose for exploration when we meet on this? Okay, hearing none, then we're off to member reports, and I will leave the member report is that the budget coordinating group met. Bob was not able to come because of the mix-up. Kay sat in. This is not a voting committee, so that it's always appropriate, and it's always been the BCG's view that people can substitute on the committee since it's not a voting position. The summary points are in the mail to you, and they talked about the major goals of the committee and for the years being the same as it was last year to try and help us get to town meeting with a consensus on a budget, and also to have the discussion about that to assist in the development of that process. And so I don't know, Kay, did you have anything to add since you were at the meeting today? Okay. Are there other member reports?
For you.
Yes.
On this summary points, how are those distributed to all the boards? I mean, you distributed them to us. Have you decided this year maybe that you had a mailing list of everybody who sits on every board and it would go out so that we know everybody has them? I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah. I'm smiling only because we know the select board has been getting them, we know the finance committee has been getting them, and we think, and we're pretty sure that the library trustees have actually been getting them. And it's the school committee that admits, the school committee members admit that they fell down on the job and have promised that they are going to correct that this year. So that came up for discussion today.
It would be nice if there were like one central place, though, if you had a mailing list, an emailing list of everyone, and it went out. It's just a suggestion. We don't have to discuss it, but
I've had enough trouble at times keeping up with the budget coordinating group mailing list. I'm sort of afraid of taking on a much larger mailing list to manage, but we can talk to the town staff and see if there's somebody who's in a position to do that. And
They're posted on the web, are they not?
They are. It's a question of making sure affirmatively that they are received, and so it's a question as to whether if one of the people in the town manager's office, Debbie and Deborah, think that they have access to the email addresses for all of the elected boards and committees, including the school committees and the library trustees, then it would not be difficult to do that. Other committee reports? Yes.
The school committees have a budget subcommittee, and that's made up of the 3 chairs, Debbie Gould from Pelham, Irv Rhodes from Amherst, and Rick Hood from Region. They have put together a capital plan, and they use the model that the town used, and it is very exciting to finally see their needs put down on paper and spread out over the years, and what's a priority, and if they don't get the money, how they'll shift things around. Very well done, very thoughtful, and it's a step in the right direction. They initiated it last year in terms of setting it up, and now they're moving forward.
Others? Anyone else? Okay, so then, do you have any minutes ready to go at this
We
point?
do.
March 5th.
March 5th.
Janice did email me one typographical change, WHERE to WERE in the 4th, sort of number 4.
Where?
It's the.
I
sorry,
see,
yeah,
I
exactly.
see, okay.
Yeah, there's just change the,
I already.
block out the H. That was the only feedback I got.
Okay. So, anything else on March 5th? That, then the motion would be in order. Yes.
I move that we approve the minutes of March 5th as corrected.
Second.
And Bob has to
Oh,
abstain.
and I was there also.
I have to abstain.
No,
was
you
there.
weren't there.
I
I
wasn't.
was there.
Bob wasn't there.
I distinctly remember being there.
I was
No,
there
okay.
too. And I don't think I'm
Where?
listed.
You're not
Really?
listed as being there, no. So
I
that's a
was there.
correction.
That would be a correction.
That'd be a correction.
That's the one that you drove to Leverett, right?
That's
Yes.
right, yes.
Yes.
So I was there.
Yes.
That was like my first one.
Okay, so you got that correction?
Bob wasn't there.
Wasn't there, I guess.
Okay,
It was
so-
in Leverett Town Hall. Do you remember going to Leverett
Yeah.
Town Hall?
No.
So Janice, were you seconding it while you were
I was
correcting it?
seconding
Okay, so we have a further correction and a motion to approve as corrected, and a second to that motion. Further discussion, hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. 5, any opposed, any abstentions? So it's 5, 0, 1 abstention and 1 absent. Would have been an abstention if he had been here. July, we just received, so we want to,
Oh, we got it earlier this week.
I sent out the finalized copy,
Like,
and I've got, the only response I have is from Janice. who
I
said
wasn't
that she had no
there. You
comments.
weren't there.
After your corrections, of course.
I had one addition to this.
Please.
yes.
Do we consider it? Which I didn't catch till the end. Under election of the chair and vice chair, I thought we should add that the votes were retaken on July 12th.
Right.
3-0 with 1 abstaining.
Right.
And 1 abstaining. July. And 3 absent.
Were 3 absent, or was?
Is it the 5th or the 2nd?
Yes, we had 4
Yes.
members present.
Okay.
This July 5th?
Yes.
We have two together, it's July 7 and 12.
Oh, July
And
7th?
remember what had happened was is
Right.
that two members recognized that they had not gone to the clerk, and therefore we had to, or were you throwing names out?
No.
We didn't have a quorum, so we
Okay, it was
revoted.
Me?
And you.
So that's why it's a combined set of minutes, because we had the discussion and then we just retook votes in an open meeting after that was corrected. People satisfied with minutes? Okay.
Wait, did we have a motion?
Well, I was just about to ask that
Oh,
question.
Will we approve the minutes of July 12th, 2011,
Second.
Okay.
which incorporate the minutes of the unofficial meeting on July 7th.
Okay. It's been a motion and a second. It was seconded by Doug. And the motion is technically worded as the July 12th minutes. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by raising hands.
Well, actually,
Was I there?
you have to abstain, you weren't there.
I wasn't there on the 12th?
No.
Okay.
So
I'm
three.
abstaining because I wasn't there either.
So we have three. Any opposed? 0 opposed. Abstentions? We have 3 abstentions and 1 member absent. So majority has voted to approve. Majority of the people voting. Okay. So I think that takes care of that.
September
Oh,
15th.
September 15th, that's right. Yes.
Move we approve the minutes of September 15th.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made and seconded to approve the minutes of September 15th. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor indicate by raising hands. All opposed? The abstentions. So it's 4-0, 2 abstentions, 1 member absent. Have I now missed any?
Nope.
Oh, good, thank you. I can't think of any topics that I didn't reasonably anticipate 48 hours in advance. So therefore, I'm not sure, but does anybody else think of any topics that I didn't anticipate 48 hours in advance? Hearing none, then I think I heard a motion to adjourn.
No.
Second.
Second.
And I think therefore, the Finance Committee is adjourned at 9:55. I thank all of you for a very long evening and a lot of good work on some complex matters, and thank Amherst Media very much for participating by making this available to the community.